The 1-2-2 zone defense is a variation of the more commonly used 2-3 zone. The main difference is that the 1-2-2 zone defense is a great defense against the teams that score a majority of their points from the perimeter, whereas the 2-3 zone provides more inside presence. This is because in the 1-2-2 zone, all 5 defenders have a responsibility to guard an area on the perimeter. This allows quick closeouts and the ability to contest every shot taken from the 3-point line. Therefore, the 1-2-2 zone defense is often used against teams that have strong guards and 3-point shooters, but aren't strong on the inside. The 1-2-2 zone defense have 3 strengths. 1. Defending shooters. The 1-2-2 zone defense is better at defending against the 3-point shot that the 2-3 zone is. 2. Fast break. With the top player in the middle and 2 wings, the player are in great positions to transition into the fast break if there is a turnover. Put your point guard on a wing and put a long athletic player that can finish at the top. 3. Trapping opportunities. There are great trapping opportunities out of the 1-2-2 zone defense, especially in the corner. Weaknesses. The 3 biggest weaknesses of the 1-2-2 zone defenses are: Number 1. Rebounding. Since no players have their own player they're on, everyone must find a player to box out when there's a shot. 2. The high post. The opposition getting the basketball into the high post is what hurts a 1-2-2 zone defense the most. A good passing team that manages to get the basketball there often can pick your team apart. 3. Post players must guard corners. This can be a problem if you have post players that don't move quickly or if you have only a couple of big players that you prefer to leave inside the key. 1-2-2 zone defense rules. Number 1. Hands up at all times. Teams must keep the basketball out of paint and the high post. That's where the difference is most vulnerable. Number 2. Move on airtime of the pass. If players don't move on the airtime of the pass, they're going to get to their assignment too late, which allow the offensive player to take an uncontested shot or get in the lane and create for their teammates. Number 3. Prevent inside passes. When running the 1-2-2, we do not deny perimeter passes. Instead, all defenders sag back and prevent the inside pass, similar to the pack line defense. 4. Rebound. As with all zones, on each shot attempt, every player must find someone to box out and then go after the rebound. 5. Post players must front the post in order to get out to the shooters in the corners quickly. All bigs must be fronting the post when the basketball is on the side of their court. The 1-3-1 zone defense is a unique defense that is run by teams at many different levels. It's been successfully run by many youth teams all the way up to college basketball. This defense works best if you have long, athletic players, but with a couple of simple adjustments, can easily work with teams with a variety of athletes. At its core, the 1-3-1 zone defense is an aggressive defense that relies on cutting off passing lanes, anticipation, and deflection to create turnovers and fast break opportunities for your team. If you decide to implement the 1-3-1 zone defense for your team, it's imperative that you're ready to play for basketball. So what are the goals of the 1-3-1 zone? The 1-3-1 zone defenses is a very different concept to most defenses. While in most defenses, you always have a player defending directly between the opponent with the basketball and the basket. The 1-3-1 instead cuts off normal passing lanes and forces the offensive team to throw lob passes over the defense, pass low bounce passes around the defense, or attack off the dribble. This gives the defensive team plenty of opportunities to read the pass and get deflections or steals. Advantage of the 1-3-1 zone defense. Number 1. The offense has to adjust to your defense. While running the 1-3-1, it's so unique and different to most defenses that opposition teams can't run their regular offense. They are forced to adjust and play much differently than they're used to. 2. Speeds up the game. Great for teams with athletes that want to play a fast style of basketball. 3. Causes mass confusion. Because of the uniqueness of the defense, players will be confused as to how they should play against it and where it's best to attack the zone. 4. Great for transition offense. When your team does get steals, they're in the perfect positions to run the floor and get an easy score. Both wings sprint the sidelines and the chaser will usually be the person in front. 5. Easy to prepare for the opposition. There are only a couple of ways to attack the 1-3-1 zone defense. Most teams will go to a 2-1-2 offense. Your team will know what to expect and how to defend the limited variations. 6. Changes tempo of the game. This is a fantastic defense to implement mid-game when you want to change the tempo or need a couple of quick steals. The offense won't know what hit them. 7. Many variations and adjustments. As you'll see further, the 1-3-1 has plenty of variations and adjustments that will allow you to easily adjust to different teams and counteract their strengths. 8. It's fun and exciting. I found out that players love to run this defense and getting them to buy in to it is easy. Players love their encouraged to anticipate and go for steals and deflections. It creates great transition offense and it's unique. There are also disadvantages of the 1-3-1 zone defense. And first off, there are few areas that can be exploited. The 1-3-1 zone defense is weak in a couple of areas, specifically the corners and high post. 2. Your team will give up easy baskets. When you're running an aggressive defense like the 1-3-1 and players are diving for deflections all game, you must be okay with giving up easy baskets from time to time. Players will occasionally be caught out of position. 3. Size does matter. Although it's possible to have success using this defense with a small team, it definitely makes it easier if you have tall, long athletes. 4. Takes time to learn. If you're not using the 1-3-1 as your main defense, then you have to question whether it's worth the limited practice time to spend teaching it to your team. 5. Rebounding. As with any zone, rebounding is an issue since players aren't on direct opponents to box out. Players must attack the boards and find someone to put the body on. 6. Requires a lot of energy. If your team doesn't go on the bench, then your players will quickly get fatigued and struggle to run out of the game. If you're going to use the 1-3-1 zone defense, you must be willing to use your bench. 1-3-1 zone defense rules. Number 1. No direct passes. Your defense must not allow any straight line passes. They must stay in the passing lane and force the opposition to make high lob passes and slow bounce passes. 2. Moving on airtime of the pass. Players must rotate to the next position as the ball is being passed through the air. This requires them to be in stance and anticipating where the next pass will be made. If your team is too slow, the opposition will get many open shots. 3. Everyone must crash the boards. Since zones are susceptible to offensive rebounds, every player must crash the boards hard when a shot is made and get the rebound. 4. Must stay in defensive stance. If players aren't in defensive stance, they'll be too late to react when passes are made. Being late will lead to open shots and breakdowns in the defense. The coach must be constantly reminding the players to get their hands up. 5. Read the passer's eye. Defenders must always be reading the passer's eyes and anticipating where the next pass will be made to. The 1-3-1 is an aggressive gambling zone, and players should be going for deflections when they get a chance. The 2-3 zone defense. The 2-3 zone defense is by far the most common zone in basketball, and is more than likely the specific formation that will come to a coach's mind when they hear the term zone relating to basketball. The 2-3 zone defense involves two players across the top of the zone near each high post. These players are referred to as the guards, 1 and 2. Two players are a step outside of each block, known as the forwards, 3 and 4. And the player in the middle of the key referred to as the center, 5. The biggest difference between a man-to-man and a zone defense is that instead of being responsible for a certain offensive player, all defensive players are instead responsible for an area of the court. The image shows the main areas each position is responsible for, but keep in mind that they definitely do overlap at times depending on where the ball is on the court. Make no mistake, a 2-3 zone defense doesn't allow your team to rest on defense. A great 2-3 zone defense requires more than just as effort as a great man-to-man defense. Advantages of a 2-3 zone defense. 1. Protects the paint. The 2-3 zone defense is a great defense to keep the ball as far away from the hoop as possible. This is accomplished by the center basically never leaving the paint and always having help very close. 2. Teams aren't prepared for a zone. Every team prides themselves on their man-to-man offense and sets plays. How often do most coaches practice their zone offense or set plays against the zone? Rarely ever. Most coaches will only have a couple of practice to prepare themselves for your 2-3 zone defense. 3. Will limit fouling. Due to a combination of factors, players will simply don't foul as much while playing in a zone defense. 4. Teams aren't patient. The number one way to beat a zone is with smart passing and being patient until you get a good shot. Well, I have good news. Not many teams are patient. You'll find most teams rush and will often take contested shots or they'll turn the ball over trying to make fancy passes against the zone. 5. Tempo control. A good zone defense can dictate how fast the game is played. Want a faster tempo? Play a more aggressive trapping zone. Want to slow the game down? Play a patient zone with minimal traps. 6. Fast break opportunities. With both guards always at the top, the position of a zone puts players in great position to fast break many times throughout the game. When it comes to the weakness of a 2-3 zone defense, there are 5. 1. Great outside shooting. The biggest disadvantage of a 2-3 zone defense is that it can struggle against great outside shooting teams. It's the trade-off this defense makes in order to pack the paint so well. 2. Rebounding. In a zone, players don't have specific matchups, they guard areas. This can make rebounding a problem at times. 3. Offense chooses matchups. Though there will always be great help if they get beaten off the dribble, if the offense want to match their best player up against your worst player, every time down the floor, they can. 4. Playing from behind. If you're playing from behind, teams can use up all of the shot clock on each possession. If there is no shot clock, well, it looks like you can't play zone anymore. 5. A loose link. The zone relies heavily on the team working together as a unit. If any player doesn't fulfill their role, other defendants will have to compensate and it will lead to open gaps and usually easy scores for the other team. The 4 most important rules of a 2-3 zone. 1. Everyone must have active hands and be in stance. Great passing is one of the weaknesses of the zone. If teams are able to effectively make passes inside the zone, the whole floor opens up for the offensive team. The defense must keep their hands up and active at all times to discourage passes inside and get deflections. Being in stances makes it quicker to react when a pass is made or a potential steal opportunity rises. 2. Everyone must move on the flight of the ball. Everyone must move on the flight of the ball and not on the catch. Moving on the flight of the ball means we're in defensive position when the offensive player receives the basketball. The quicker your team gets to the player with the ball, the better your defense will be. 3. Everyone must communicate. Communication is critical to every defense, and that includes the 2-3 zone. Players must communicate screens, cutters, bumping, who's got the player with the basketball, etc. All great zones have great communication. 4. No layups. This point may seem like the odd one out, but it must be included. Do not allow layups against your zone. Players must not make it easy for the offensive team inside. The traditional man-to-man defense is by far the most common defense in the game of basketball today. This is especially true as players progress to a higher level of competition. In fact, due to the great outside shooting of professional players, every NBA team almost exclusively plays man-to-man defense. The man-to-man defense involves all 5 defensive players on the court being allocated one opposition player who are accountable for defending whenever they're on defense. Of course, there will be times when players switch opponents or help each other on defense, but for the most part, each player is responsible for one player from the opposition. Strengths. First off, every player needs to learn man-to-man defensive principles. It's crucial that all youth players develop good man-to-man habits and understand man-to-man defensive principles. 2. Many variations. There are many different ways to run your man-to-man defense depending on the team you're playing against and what strengths and weaknesses of your team are. 3. Preparation for future basketball. The better players get a man-to-man defense during their youth, the more opportunities they'll get as they advance to higher levels of play. Weaknesses. 1. There's a lot to teach. Players will need to learn more defensive skills than if they were able to play backline defense or zone defense. A lot of situations, a player must know how to defend and where to position themselves. 2. It will take time for your players to successfully run. One of the most common reasons for youth coaches running a zone is that they don't have enough time to teach a man-to-man defense. They're right, there's a lot to learn and it will take time, but it's definitely worth it. 3. Unable to hide weak players. In the man-to-man defense, everyone is held accountable for their role defending the basketball and being able to help and rotate when needed. Man-to-man defense rules. Number 1. No middle penetration. If you plan to run the man-to-man defense with your team, the next sentence is the most important thing that you need to teach them. Not allowing the opponent into the middle of the lane from the top or the wing is the most important rule of man-to-man defense. Instead, defensive players must use their stance and position themselves in such a way that the opposition can only dribble down the sideline and the baseline. When an opposition player has the basketball at the top of the key, we direct them towards the sideline. When an opposition player has the basketball on the wing, we direct them towards the baseline. The reason we direct opponents towards the sideline and baseline is because it's much easier to defend and rotate on the baseline drive than it is when a player drives into the middle of the lane. This is because the help defenders' roles and responsibility are clear in regard to who is meant to help and rotate when the basketball is on the wings or in the corners. When the basketball is driven into the middle, however, who is meant to help and who is meant to stay on their player becomes difficult to define, which often leads to open scoring opportunities for the opposition. 2. No balls reversals. The more you can get the defensive team to move and rotate, the more gaps will open up in the defense and the number of open scoring opportunities will rise. So when you're playing man-to-man defense, once the basketball has been passed to one side of the floor, we never want to allow it to reverse back to the top or the opposite side. The players defending the ball reversal should be 100% deny the entire time. 3. No help from defenders one pass away. This is the biggest difference between pack line defense and the man-to-man defense. In the pack line defense, the players one pass away from the basketball are helping in the driving lanes by taking away dribble penetration. This allows the basketball to be passed around the perimeter. In man-to-man defense, since the players one pass away from the basketball are denying the pass to their player, this leaves driving lanes open and means the on-ball defender is more accountable for keeping the player with the basketball out of the lane. If an opposition player does attempt to drive down the middle, the player one pass away can quickly stunt in their direction to get the offensive player to pick up the dribble, but they can never fully help. If they do, it will often lead to an in-rhythm jumper or an offensive drive after a difficult closeout. 4. No face cuts. A defensive player must never allow their opponent to cut across their face in between them and basketball. The no face cuts rule will most commonly occur when the offense performs a pass and cut. When an offensive player makes a pass to a teammate, the player defending the passer must immediately jump to the basketball to force their opponent to cut behind them instead of in front. The rule is also important when playing defense of the ball to stop players from flashing to the ball to receive a pass. To put it simply, a defender must always stay between their man and the basketball whenever they're playing off-ball defense. 5. Move when the ball moves. The final rule is to ensure that players are playing correct off-ball defense. Whenever the basketball moves, every defensive player on the court should be adjusting their positioning on the court. By keeping the importance of this in mind, players will learn that they must stay alert at all times and anticipate passes that they may be able to deflect. As the great Don Mayer puts it, positioning, anticipation, and technique create quickness. Therefore, you can always get quicker. This is incredibly important because the difference between a steal and an open layup or a missed steal and a breakdown of defense can be a fraction of a second.